We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson, and we need some intro music. Mike Renner is with us.
Back.
PFF draft expert.
We could have put Mike's head up on the windows.
We could have put a face.
Mike's all silhouette with the hair.
Glad we didn't.
We need to get Renner's face back up here. This is like a throwback for longtime listeners. 2017, we did the three-way dance here.
Yeah.
For the PFF NFL podcast. So
in the tiny room.
Yes.
Those are always fun.
We'd squeeze in to the podcast room and fight for our takes. It was tough with the three-way dance. So Mike's the co-host of 2 for 1 Drafts.
Mm-hmm.
Check it out.
Which is go check it out.
It's getting rave reviews, I hear.
Oh yeah. And if you listen and maybe leave a review, maybe you get a draft guide. Oh yeah, we can't really see each other.
You guys give out draft guides on that?
Possibly, if you to certain the best reviews we get.
How many pages are we up to on the draft guide? I was pushing it was 477 on the first iteration. Now it's
I don't like to say pages because I feel like that's almost intimidating. When it's like, I got to read 500 pages. People don't like to read, so
you don't.
Well, at least I don't like to read.
You have to learn how to market, I think.
I'd say the number of players, 200 players.
200 players.
You get all the data on 200 players.
Times
There's only 250 get drafted or so. So pretty much everyone that's going to get drafted. By the time it's fully finished, if you get a subscription, 300 players, team pages. You won't find this anywhere else.
And you don't think the people are capable of doing the math in their head that if there's 200 players and a couple of pages on each one, there's a lot of pages.
But then it's like I'm not reading. It doesn't feel like reading. It feels like
experiencing.
It's like it's an encyclopedia, though. You're not going to read the whole encyclopedia. You're just going to reference it.
You're going to dip in the bit that you need and out.
Anyway, the draft guide's great. It's a part of your PFF Edge or Elite subscription, so go check that out over at pff.com. We're having Mike on here because he is our new draft expert. Took my job a couple years ago.
I'll say it's not new anymore, Steve. This happened a while ago.
It's all new.
Get over it.
It's all new. It's all new to me. So we want to speak high level about the draft. It'll be like the PFF NFL podcast kicking off draft season with a high level view of the draft, strengths and weaknesses, and the whole deal. So, draft, talk, discuss. Now let's
go.
It's good to have quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are the story of this draft, in my opinion, and the offseason in general. But it is like 1, 2, 3 on our draft board are all quarterbacks. That's not happened before.
And Trevor Lawrence is at the top.
Yeah.
Well, so let's discuss Trevor first. How good is he? And was there any debate for anyone else sitting at top?
There's not a debate. He's that good. And don't get me wrong, these guys are talented. Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance have all tools for days. Like they are all absurdly talented for what you want at the quarterback position. But Trevor Lawrence is in his own right and has also played the game at just a different level in the areas that kind of project to the NFL. Like he operates that offense, the timing that he plays with, getting to his reads, avoiding pressure, protecting his offensive line, like doing the things you're going to have to do in the NFL. He does already, and at a very high level. Like you just haven't seen guys this NFL ready since we started grading.
How much of what separates Lawrence with Wilson in particular, right? Because Wilson's number 2 on our board. Wilson's season this year was special. PFF grade insane. His arm is special. There's a lot to like with Wilson. I think the closer we get to the draft, the more you're going to start seeing people, even if it's just the hipster's choice, putting Wilson above Lawrence in some drafts.
Yeah, if you told me that Zach Wilson, the theoretical arm talent, arm strength plus accuracy is like arm talent. He might have the best arm talent in the draft class. The ball goes where he wants it to go, to anywhere, even like 50 yards past the line of scrimmage.
Off-platform to like the whole thing.
Whenever like it goes where he wants it to go. He just played in a BYU offense and the level of competition and only 1 year of it where you just don't feel as confident. Like, he didn't have to face blitzes. He didn't have to face pressure with that BYU offensive line and the defenses he faced. That just wasn't a thing that factored in. That's going to be different in the NFL. He's going to have to manipulate pockets. He's going to have to do different things. He's going to have to work a lot quicker than he did at BYU. Whereas Trevor Lawrence, like, he didn't have a good offensive line this year. His receivers were not nearly as good as they've been in the past. Like, they're fine, but he was not working with, a first-round type of wide receiver that he knew could get open every single play and was still, like, working magic in that offense.
So my question was, coming into the season, like, Trevor Lawrence is one of those guys that was like the wire-to-wire #1 overall pick, right?
Yeah.
Like, you saw him play one game as a true freshman, and you're like, all right, that's it. This is the guy. He's a future #1 overall. But then, of course, along the way, it's like, all right, there's always some indecision or someone else will bring something up. So coming into the season, there was some debate about Justin Fields potentially being the #1 overall guy from Ohio State. So with Fields, first off, how did you get to Wilson over Fields? When did you make that call? Because you finalize this draft board here. You take input, but I mean, it's your numbers. It's your rankings here. How did we get to Wilson over Fields? And was Fields ever close to Trevor Lawrence in your mind?
Fields was going into the season. Like, if he would have had the season that Zach Wilson did, where it's just wire to wire of no faults, he could have been in the conversation with Trevor Lawrence. He obviously did not. Shit the bed against Northwestern. Did not play well whatsoever in that game. Also against Indiana, showed a number of mistakes. Like, there are issues on his tape that are real and that are concerning when projecting the NFL. Still, talent level is insane. But the Zach Wilson, the biggest difference is just the amount of kind of the degree of difficulty. Yes, it was at BYU, and yes, it was not the best competition. Yes, he had a good offensive line, but you can still judge how difficult the throws he was making were. And night and day between, like I said, anyone else in the country. He made more high-level throws that are projectable to the NFL than anyone else at the quarterback position this year into tight windows. His grade into tight windows this year was better than Joe Burrow's was last year. And
Burrow's,
as good as it gets that we had seen before that. So Zach Wilson, that was the biggest differentiator to me.
Were you surprised when you went through Wilson's tape that's what you saw? I mean, obviously you're keeping tabs with the NFL, with the college season. It's not like you hadn't seen him, but there's a difference between like watching and then like really going through the film. And that was when we said, okay, he's #2, man. He's behind Lawrence. Were you surprised at how much you liked Wilson when you went through?
Yeah, I was, because obviously it wasn't even really on radars going into this year. A lot of that's because he had the shoulder injury the year prior, the torn labrum that wasn't quite completely rehabbed from, and that I expected his tape to look more like Mac Jones's, where it's just like, oh, that guy's wide open, that's 80 yards, that's whatever.
Right.
And it wasn't whatsoever. Like, he was not the guys he's hitting downfield. Like, yeah, it wasn't the best competition at cornerbacks that he's necessarily worried about, but like, they were still in hip pockets of his wide receivers. He didn't have the most talented wide receivers, and he's hitting them in stride where the ball needs to be. And so, yeah, I was floored when I watched his tape, like, in totality.
What about Mac Jones, who you mentioned there? Do you think, and from a PFF standpoint, if we look back, were we too low on Josh Allen? Were we too low on Justin Herbert in general? The toolsy guys seem to be working. Patrick Mahomes, I guess, at an extreme example. Where does Mac Jones stand there? Are you concerned about Tua and how he looked this year? And how much do you connect those dots, right? Alabama and system and this incredible group of receivers with Mac Jones.
I'm definitely concerned about Tua. He wasn't, until a guy's shown me he's good, you don't have great faith that he's going to be good. There were issues. I thought there were reason to be encouraged, and I'm not giving up on him. It wasn't Josh Rosen-esque rookie year. It wasn't, complete nothing. There were reasons to be encouraged, but he wasn't overcoming a situation by any means. Like, it wasn't like Joe Burrow, not a great situation with that offensive line. He obviously overcame it at times, like, showed a lot to be encouraged about. Mac Jones is just, it was too easy. And there are throws, like there are even like positives on his tape in terms of like plays that result in like 80, 90-yard touchdowns where it's just like, that's not really a good throw. Like it's only it only results in that because he had a window that's probably 20 yards long that he could have fitted into. And it's just when he goes to the Senior Bowl and more controlled environment, none of that schematic or talent advantage, it's hard to go through that week of practice tape and be like, that guy was obviously better than Kellen Mond there. Like, not like that much better than Kellen Mond. Obviously, like his play over the course of his career at Alabama was, but there's nothing that really separates him in that regard. And I think when you don't have, in this day and age in the NFL, when you don't have strong arm and when you don't have escapability in the pocket, that's a lot. Like you're just limiting yourself. Like your ceiling's Kirk Cousins at that point. Like, and you should do better than Kirk. Like you should set your sights higher than a guy like that. So that's why he's just a little lower on your board. Like still could be a good serviceable NFL quarterback, but like, is that worth top 10 pick?
Are we just in this world now where if you're coming from that Alabama offense over the past couple of seasons, given how ridiculously easy it is, and 1.2 is throwing to 4 first-round wide receivers, right?
Yeah.
Do you just need to be like, we just need to drop that guy because of the unknown, right? It's like playing Madden on rookie mode, right? It's just too easy. It's not that you can't play it on a greater difficulty, but there's no way of knowing.
But on the other hand, too, the guys that have developed well at the NFL level the last couple of years, Patrick Mahomes didn't have a great situation. Josh Allen didn't have a great situation. Justin Herbert didn't have a great situation. Dak Prescott didn't have a good situation.
Yeah.
And all those guys became really good NFL quarterbacks, and has that clouded the evaluation process a little bit?
I think there is something to, like I remember when Daniel Jones coming out, I said once he gets to the NFL, it's going to be easier. Like you're getting better practice by playing with worse talent in college football.
Right.
You're practicing bad habits when you're at Alabama and you're Mac Jones, and you're running concepts that you're just not going to be able to run.
Yeah. At the very minimum, it isn't helping.
Yes. Like you're almost ingraining, kind of like with Carson Wentz in Philly. He had such a good offensive line that it ingrained in him bad habits about what he can do in the pocket.
He had time. He could
And
play slower.
As soon as that went away, and not even to like a bad level, to like a mediocre level across the NFL, he turns into a pumpkin.
This run of toolsy quarterbacks working out, do you think two things? One, do you think that's actually a trend that is something that's changing in the NFL level, and we should be thinking about how we evaluate draft quarterbacks differently going forward, or have we just gone on a run of those guys working out? And secondly, is that going to change the way people look at Trey Lance in particular and say, okay, in this year more than other years, given the recent history of guys working out, this is actually somebody we should be pushing up draft boards, as opposed to 5 years ago where we'd be saying, look, that guy's raw as hell, we're not going near that this early?
I think it's a trend because I think offenses have realized how to tap into that better. Like the offenses that guys are running now in the NFL use their quarterback's mobility. Like use them as rushing threats. Josh Allen, obviously, in that offense, even obviously when the play Patrick Mahomes got hurt on against the Browns, he was running a speed option like that. They're taking advantage. NFL teams are far more willing to take advantage of that. And then with the way offenses are run, being play action heavy and having to attack areas down the football field that maybe they weren't in prior years, arm strength gives you so much leeway on a 40-yard throw when you can put it there on a line than when it has to be arced in terms of the timing and the window you have. That, like, Patrick Mahomes is not a top 3 most accurate quarterback in the NFL. He might not even be top 5 in terms of just like the ball going where it needs to go, like where he wants it to go. But his arm is so strong and he can do it from anywhere, and he knows how to operate within the timing of that offense, that when the window's big enough, you have a lot of leeway, and he gives himself a lot of leeway with how strong that arm is. So I do think, like I said, NFL offenses are catering better to guys with that skill set, and it's opening up a lot more.
So Jake Locker got a raw deal.
Well, but go back further, right? Can you imagine, like, go back and watch what the Falcons were doing with Michael Vick and be like, what were you playing at? You just stuck this guy in a West Coast offense.
That was the worst headline I ever read.
And then built like a couple of, rush options off. Like, it's ridiculous. You put Michael Vick in this draft, the breadth of the NFL's capability of actually doing something with that is just light years ahead of where it was 20 years ago.
I remember when we graded, this is a while ago, we graded 2006, went back and graded, it's probably like my third or fourth year at PFF, maybe like 2015. And of Vince Young, they ran 2 option plays the first drive with Vince Young in the Tennessee game against the Colts. They went for like 15 yards and like 25 yards.
Yeah.
They didn't run another option the rest of the game. Yeah. And it was like as basic
because they'd
inside
exhausted
zone,
like the 2 that they had.
Like they had run, it was the basic like zone read. And then that was it after that.
Yeah.
And like that.
And there was no connection between those option plays that they were running and the passing concepts. It's just, we've got Vince Young. We need to give him an option run somewhere. Let's just call one and then go back to the standard, play that we're running in the pass game.
Like, there's no difference between Vince Young and like Jalen Hurts, right? As players, I mean, Jalen Hurts is getting hyped up as the future in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah. I mean, Vince Young, another guy I think that got hosed by the era that he came into the league.
You might I call it the JT Barrett theory. Trying to get this to catch on. JT Barrett had a game at Ohio State a couple years ago where he was like 9 for 23 and just terrible, right? But he ran 16 times for 100 yards, a couple touchdowns. And it was like, you can still add value. In a horrible passing attack, you could still add value. And you can have these terrible games that are still somewhat good offense, even though it looks ugly. I feel like there are going to be a few teams, and Jalen Hurts has a little bit of that. Taysom Hill has some of that, where it's this like ugly stat line that still produces. I think there's more of that now, too, right, in today's NFL.
Yeah, I've said it for a while. If you have a rushing threat like that, a quarterback, it's a high floor. You've given yourself a good running game at the very least.
And the reverse is, I think, becoming true as well, right? If everything we've just been saying in terms of teams are better at dealing with these athletes now and taking advantage of what they do and providing that high floor, and that's why these toolsy guys are working out more, the old style statuesque pocket passer is becoming less valuable. It's becoming less. You need to be so good.
Yeah, they're
unless
just
it's
not
Tom
strong.
Brady.
Exactly.
Well, you need to be that, right?
You
need to be so good at being just a immobile pocket passer for you to work out, and that happening like day one in the NFL is really hard. Those guys, you need to buy yourself the margin for error by being able to run around and do other things that raises your floor. If you're a Mac Jones, right, and even if you are amazing within the pocket, like that guy can't move. You need to be so incredible at all the other stuff for you to be as good as these other guys.
But really quick though, the guys that we've missed on, the guys that the NFL's missed on in recent years are Sam Darnold. Doesn't do a ton outside. He's got some outside the pocket magic, but not great. Josh Rosen, Dwayne Haskins, guys who really don't do a lot outside of structure, right?
Yeah.
Also, Biskey. That one.
Trevor could run.
That's what I mean.
Trubisky
that
can
one
only
kind
run
of takes
but
that kind of slaps your theory a little bit.
So what I was saying earlier, the worst headline I've ever read was like Michael Vick. They're gonna put him in the West Coast offense. They tried to make Michael Vick into Joe Montana or Steve Young, however you want to view that.
Yeah,
but I think the NFL is much better today at not just putting a guy into a system, building the system around the quarterback. So,
all right, Mike, talk wide receivers. We're going to start with the Alabama receivers, right? Now, first of all, am I right in essentially comparing them to the last year's duo and saying Devontae Smith is a rough analog for Jerry Jeudy and Jalen Waddle is a rough analog for Henry Ruggs? It's the same thing over again in the first round.
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy.
Now, explain to me why you haven't learned the lesson from last year and you have Jalen Waddle above Devontae Smith.
So I had Jeudy over Ruggs last year.
Okay.
Waddle is a very different player than Henry Ruggs. Like Ruggs wasn't productive at Alabama. It just wasn't.
Just
and there's
pure
a reason.
speed.
But how much of that is because when he was there were 4 of those guys, whereas when Waddle was this year, certainly there was just him and Smith left.
No, Waddle's just like a different type of athlete. They're both very fast. There's a reason why Jalen Waddle has been their kick returner ever since he was true freshman year, because he's also dynamic. Like Henry Ruggs broke tackles by running in a straight line, like how Paris Campbell broke tackles. So it's just like, I'm fast, and your angle's gonna be bad. And you're gonna hit my legs, and it's not gonna matter.
Yeah,
Jalen Waddle can shake you. He can do a lot of different things, and he also runs like a low 4.3, and has a ton of contested catches on his tape. Attacks the ball really well. I love going back and watching some of his high school tape where he played cornerback and some of the hits he laid on guys. Like that physicality, that you need to play the wide receiver position is there with Jalen Waddle. And, oh, by the way, in their last 7 healthy games, he produced more than Devontae Smith, yards-wise.
Okay.
So,
All right.
In 2018, when all 4 of those guys were there, Waddle had the highest grade.
yeah,
Of
Waddle
those
was,
guys.
his yards per route for his career is, I think, the highest in the class.
Now, Sam, who loves Jerry Jeudy, I mean, to the point where it's been memed. We have a whole meme account, Mike. I don't know if you've seen it.
And it's not us doing it.
Podcast.
It's like
meme
other
account.
people.
Okay, yeah.
There are memes about Sam's love for Jerry Jeudy. And he comes out here the other day, and I couldn't even believe it, and says he likes Devontae Smith more than his guy Jerry Jeudy. I could not even believe that Sam landed at that take. Your thoughts?
I disagree with it. I could see why. There's things that Devontae Smith does a lot better. He is better in contested situations. I think he has a bigger catch radius. He's similarly dynamic. I don't think he's near the pure route runner. And then you also add the size factor that it just matters more when you get to the NFL. I don't care who you are, 175 pounds is going to show up more on tape when you're in the NFL than it does in college. And especially like how they used him in college, where he could be anywhere on any given play and there was no, like, yeah, obviously you'd like to use them in that way in the NFL, but if a lot of times in the NFL your X is just lined up on the edge of the offensive line. Now he did that more as a junior, but just lined up and asked to beat guys one-on-one. I don't know if his skills at winning one-on-one to me aren't as good as Jerry Jeudy's.
But that's like, agreed. That's like his one flaw, though, right? Is that he's built like a chopstick. And at some point, you anticipate that's probably going to be an issue at the NFL level because most people are not built like that play at that kind of level. But to me, it's one of those things where, yeah, I definitely get why it's a concern, but it's one of those things where if you can't really see it on tape being an issue, and granted, Alabama is a lot harder to find those plays than it will be in the NFL, I'm not buying into it too much. When you looked at Andy Isabella and you watched his tape, you're like, anytime anybody touches that guy, it's a problem.
Yeah.
You don't see the same thing with Devontae Smith.
No, I agree with that. We're more just splitting hairs about the high end here. It's just like Devontae Smith's awesome. I don't want to poke too many holes in his game.
For clarity,
but we're just saying Jerry Jeudy's.
For clarity, our wide receiver board right now has Jamar Chase, number 1 wide receiver, number 5 overall on the board. Jalen Waddle, number 7 on the board. Devontae Smith, number 8. So we have 3 receivers in the top 10, which brings me to my next question. Last year, it was about Ruggs, Jeudy, and CeeDee Lamb. I think we had you on the show before the season, and you said, look, this class might be better for wide receivers than last year's really, really good class that turns out Justin Jefferson was the best guy as a rookie. How does this class compare to last year's with this incredible influx of wide receiver talent now the last few seasons?
It's close. I'm not going to say it's better. I think if Chris Olave would have declared, it would have been better. But the top of the class, I think, I feel better about. Like, these guys don't have a lot of question marks. Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. With Jeudy and Lamb wasn't the fastest. Jeudy was kind of skinny, didn't face a lot of press coverage, didn't have, dealing with physicality, whatever. That was kind of question mark. Then Jamar Chase, 19 years old, balling in the SEC. They're like 210 pounds. Jalen Waddle, much more dynamic version of Henry Ruggs without the production concerns. Devontae Smith, I mean, the only knocks realistically on him are just size and age at this point.
What about speed? Because before the season,
I disagree with
Senior Bowls, Jim Nagy came out and said what did he say? He said he ran 4.5, right?
People are going to nitpick Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith for speed, particularly when Waddle is in this first round at the same time. It's going to be the Henry Ruggs thing all over again. It's like you've got 2 guys that were demonstrably better, and we're going to go with the guy that runs a 4.2.
Yeah, I liked my initial take on Jamar Chase was that he was like a bigger Antonio Brown, which is Antonio Brown runs 4.5, right? Like he's not that fast, but he just knows how to get open. And I'm watching Chase more and more. I think Jordy Nelson might be a pretty good, he just knows how to get open, and he's at every level of the field, he's gonna be good. I am curious to see if 40 times, if they run them, which is another thing, if they run them, if speed is going to be
they'll run them, but we'll be back to this world of quick, run the frames on it because this is at its pro day, and who the hell knows how long that 40 is.
Yeah. Jason Florida, though, ran a 4.4 back last spring. So
I didn't think he felt fast, but there's at times where you could see it. Yeah. My other question, 2 guys ranked in the 20s. Rondell Moore at 25 on the board and Kadarius Toney at 27. We're talking dudes who are 5'9". I mean, Moore's 5'9". Tony's listed at 6 feet. He's just smaller. He's a little younger at the position. What are your thoughts on those guys?
It's an awesome slot receiver class. Like those gadget guys. There's so many dynamic guys in that mold. Not even just those two. Also, K. Johnson from South Dakota State, Jalen Darden from North Texas, Tutu Atwell from Louisville. All those guys in a similar speed slot, kind of like KJ Hamler was last year, where he went second. Moore is just, I think Moore can win on the outside. Is the other thing.
This is Elijah Moore?
This is Rondale Moore, excuse me.
Oh, Rondale. Okay, yeah.
I think Rondale Moore can win on the outside. I think Elijah Moore might be able to, too. He led the nation in broke tackles as a true freshman. He's got a 42-inch vertical. He's jacked out of his mind. Like he is a true freak of nature. He's short, but he is not small, Rondale Moore. And and his route running ability is really good. They just Purdue's offense didn't ask him to run routes because they didn't have a quarterback they knew was going to be able to hit him. So they just said, okay, we'll just run slants and screens and we'll just give the ball to you so that we don't have to worry about that in between. So it's tough. Like he's a guy you just wish would have gone to a different school. He goes to Ohio State. He might be a top 10 pick right now.
How much every year the copycat league stuff comes up, and I think there was a reason why Henry Ruggs went number 1 among wide receivers last year because
the Raiders were picking that.
Well, the Raiders said we want our Tyreek Hill, we want a guy that challenges the defense. And at the top of the draft, Jalen Waddle's that speed guy potentially, but is Rondale Moore the guy where people are going to say, he's our Tyreek Hill? We're going to use him as such and then develop him into a deep threat.
Yeah, people are going to see him and see Tyreek Hill for their offense. And honestly, of these guys, I think Jalen Waddle's probably faster. Rondale has the shiftiness of a Tyreek Hill that kind of makes Tyreek Hill.
Your comp for him was Steve Smith, right?
Steve Smith.
I like that one. You signed off on mine though, which was, or not mine, the one I stole from the guy that I can't remember the name of every time, Jerry Tuwai, the rugby player.
Yeah.
And I'm all for it. Anytime we can have a cross-sport comp, which is not the only one in this draft. You also have another cross-sport comp.
Oh yeah, I had who was it, the linebacker from Virginia, Charles Snowden, who's on the 2-4 Drafts pod.
There you go.
Kawhi Leonard, because he's 6'6".
Kawhi
has
Leonard.
35-inch arms.
He does look,
he's
and
massive.
also not a football.
Yeah,
player.
he's
long.
He's really long.
He looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you didn't use my comp for Chaz Surratt, which was Bobby Boucher from the Waterboy.
That's how he plays.
That's how he plays linebacker, and I think that should be in the draft guide. And I don't see it in there. And maybe in the next update we'll get the Bobby Boucher.
Who's
comp.
the cop linebacker from the Replacements?
Yes. What is that guy?
See, we need to start.
Bateman.
Yeah,
It was Bateman. Yeah.
Listen, you've done a really good job with player comps because they're difficult. There's not a lot of 1-for-1s, and I think we need to expand the palette to Hollywood and to other sports, and I think that's how you keep it fresh.
Anytime you can have a draft
I get the Sunshine
comp.
comp. Or I used to get the Sunshine comp a lot.
When you can get a draft comp to a fictional character, I think you're doing it well.
We should talk about how you did cut your hair, and
last time I was on the pod, I had long hair.
yeah, I mean, you had a Trevor Lawrence flow going. I mean, how old are you now?
30.
Yeah, this just feels like, hey, ladies, I'm ready to settle down now. Like, there's some seriousness to your game right now.
It actually was it was summertime, and it was really hot.
That's why I cut my hair when I was younger
And
as well.
pure
Yeah.
laziness. I was just like,
Reach
it will
the
be
point.
easier if I don't have it.
The summer with the long hair, it's not good. I don't know what that does under your beehive thing. Like,
It's not great.
in the summer.
Gets a little frizzy and
You don't look like you get much sun, though. I'll just say.
wow. Last time guest Mike Renner. One other playmaker I want to discuss, speaking of player comps that are really difficult, Kyle Pitts from Florida, 6'6", 240, a tight end. Do we even call him a tight end? Remember early in the season, Bruce Arians was talking about Rob Gronkowski. He's like, he's a tight end, he blocks. Like, if Kyle Pitts goes to that type of team, he's in trouble. You have to treat this guy uniquely.
I think he can be respected as an inline blocker. He's not complete utter liability. He has improved a lot this year, and he's still only 20 years old, I believe. Like, he'll be 20 years old when he starts next fall. So he's a young guy. So there's like George Kittle coming out was 23, I want to say.
Yeah.
So like when a guy comes out and is an inline blocker that's 23 versus 20, we talk about that with offensive linemen all the time, how big a development. He could get there. Like, he could get there as an inline blocker. So I'm not writing him off in that regard. As a receiver, though, other guys can't get to where he is as a receiver because physically he's just different. Now, he might not run a 4.4. He might only run like a 4.6. Travis Kelce ran a 4.61. If you're sub like 4.65, if you're running in the receiver range, that's where you need to be at the tight end position. He has all the other sort of movement skills, the ability to run routes like a wide receiver that you want to see. If you just considered him a wide receiver, he's 9th on our draft board right now. He really wouldn't drop much further from that position. That's how good he is.
It feels like the NFL, it's probably an issue in terms of like there aren't many of those guys, but the NFL doesn't feel great still at those tweener wide receiver tight end guys that could they're positionless, right? They're not really a tight end. They're not really a wide receiver. They're somewhere in the middle. And if you dial that in right, it's completely uncoverable, but they don't seem to quite have it figured out yet in terms of what to do with them.
I think it's the guys who aren't the tweeners that really are the successful ones. The guys who, if you just consider them wide receivers, I think that's the biggest thing is with a lot of tight ends, and why a lot of tight ends bust, like O.J. Howard, T.J. Hockenson, you're not getting your bang for your buck because they can't go out and split wide and go one-on-one against cornerback and win.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you have, I always go back to Charles Woodson against the Cowboys back in the early part of the decade, and Jason Witten. They could just say, I'm going to have Charles Woodson guard Jason Witten, and then Jason Witten's gone.
Right.
He's not going to be able to separate against Charles Woodson. If you have a guy that's not the case about, and that to me is Kyle Pitts. I mean, he was beating Derek Stingley last year one-on-one. You have a guy that's not the case about, and that's Travis Kelce. I mean, we saw him beat Denzel Ward in the playoffs on the whip route. And it's just like, if you have a guy that's not the case about, then you have that holy grail.
And not just beat him, we'll leave him on the floor.
Yeah.
To be fair, who are those guys in the NFL in
That's
the
what I'm
last 10
saying.
years? There's Gronk, Kelce, Kittle. And maybe Darren Waller now, right? And we've talked about Waller maybe, I don't know if that's what you put in the guide for Pitts, but maybe the closest comp for a Kyle Pitts, right?
Yes, that's who I have in the guide. And we really haven't seen that guy that polished coming out of college, which is the other thing. Kelce goes 2nd round, Kittle all the way to the 5th. Waller was a wide receiver before you add a lot of muscle. We really haven't seen a guy like Pitts. Like the rarity of him as a prospect is different than anything we've seen, at least.
And you're an anti-first round tight end guy.
Yes.
Because of that.
Because of that.
Right? And this is one of your theories. But I like the way you described it. If you can be that true joker, jack of all trades, whatever you want to say, you could beat a cornerback one-on-one. And there's 5 guys in the world that do that consistently. And you're saying Pitts is one of those guys, therefore he's top 10.
Yeah. And honestly, depending on the offense you're going to run and how you're going to utilize it, like if you tell me that I'm going to utilize this guy like Travis Kelce, if I'm an offensive coordinator, that's something that I could fit in my offense. I might even take him above guys like Jamar Chase, guys like Devontae Smith, because that is so, I think we've seen with Kansas City, that's so valuable. That guy that is such a mismatch.
It does, it does feel like his ceiling is insanely high, but there is that sort of worry about how many teams in the NFL are capable of accessing.
Yes.
Yeah, there's still a lot of teams that are like, look, you're a tight end, you're going to block the backside, you're going to block the tight end backside on inside zone, which is like a near impossible block too, and it's just their offense. It's what they run. By the way, I like Pitts a lot to Carolina, given what they have with
Carolina's going quarterback.
They need a quarterback, but I'm just saying if they had a quarterback to add a Pitts to DJ Moore and to Robbie Anderson.
I like Pitts to San Francisco would be incredible.
Oh gosh,
because that makes them unstoppable. Because with the run game and what they do in the run game, you have 2 tight ends always on the field.
And Ayuk,
but it can be 4 wide if they wanted. 2 tight ends could look like 4 wide.
I mean, that group of receivers would be ridiculous and completely unprecedented.
Let's call Bobby Slowick right now and plant the seed.
Like nobody would ever have had anything like that collection of talent in NFL history. 4 guys that are all run after the catch monsters, that are almost all sort of some type of tweener or at least unconventional skill set for the position. That would be absurd.
Then you'd be fine with Jimmy Garoppolo running that thing, right?
Feasibly. And it's because it also would impact the running game a lot. You'd get favorable if you treat that like 4 wide receivers, they're gonna pound the rock, and
and all 4 of those guys are a threat to carry it, as designed parts of the run game.
Oh man,
be wild.
Now I'm rooting for that, Mike.
Right?
I'm rooting for Pitts to the Niners. How about offensive line? Penei Sewell's their top guy, number 4 overall. We're seeing a lot of mock drafts where he's not the top tackle off the board. Are people over? Is this one of those the biggest red flags? No red flags. Therefore, I can't trust this guy. What is happening in these Kuiper and Jeremiah, these other mocks?
So he's not. I mean, Rashawn Slater's the guy you see guys like Daniel Jeremiah and Lance Zierlein having above Penei Sewell, and he is better at the tackle position, like the skill of playing tackle. He's a more skilled player at tackle. No one holds a candle to what Penei Sewell can do athletically. The crazy thing to me is Sewell has lost weight since he got to college. He came in 360. And if you watch his tape, you would swear just by watching him move that he's like 305, 310. He is 330 pounds and was 19 years old the last time we saw him play football. The fact, like that alone, and that he's not the most technically advanced, but he was 19 years old again. It's kind of like Kyle Pitts. Like he's not an inline blocker yet, but he's a kid still, and he's doing these things to the edge rushers he's facing. So I cannot get on board with that assessment of that tackle position. Rayson Slayer's great player. I think he'll be a solid tackle, probably could be an elite guard or center in the NFL. Penei Sewell could be, the best tackle in the NFL for the next decade plus with how physically imposing he is.
How are you generally handling the concept of this weird year where a bunch of people sat out and didn't play? Right? We saw a lot of guys be amazing a year ago and then decide it's not worth the risk. I'm going to sit out and prepare for the draft. What do you, like in a vacuum, what are you doing with that?
I assume most people get better, over the course of their college careers. We didn't see it. So it's easy to be like out of sight, out of mind. They're whatever, they didn't play this year. But a lot of guys develop at least something, maybe not in a grading perspective, but they will physically, and they've obviously had nothing else to do but work out, lift weights. So you can expect some physical development for those guys. So just trying my best to not, in my head, underrate what we saw.
So at a minimum, you're not like dinging them for sitting a year out.
I'm not dinging any of these guys for sitting a year.
Probably projecting like some slight marginal development to these guys who are already amazing.
Like the biggest one to me is Walker Little from Stanford, because it's been 2 years. He's played one game the last 2 years, tackle.
Yeah.
He was in Matt Miller's preseason mock heading in 2019. He was the number 2 overall pick in his preseason mock.
Wow.
Like that's how highly he was thought of at that time.
He's played 72 snaps since 2018.
So it's like, how can your opinion be that high on a guy when we see like offensive tackles don't go backwards also? You don't get worse. There's not a lot of offensive tackles that peak grading wise as a true sophomore. So I think he might be one of the most underrated players in this draft class in terms of the guy's physical talent is legit. Maybe the second best physical skill set after Penei Sewell in this draft class. We just never saw him develop though.
There are 9 tackles in our top 40. Walker Little's one of them. So apparently you really like the tackle class.
Good tackle class. Deeper than last year. Not the high end, but deeper.
Philosophical question here that we've touched on a lot here on the podcast. The Bengals sitting at 5. And, we all live in Cincinnati, and I think every Bengals fan's like, man, we really they're trying to figure out ways for Penei Sewell to fall. Is that their best bet? Or are they better going wide? I've had this theory that they should go wide receiver and maybe attack the offensive line either in free agency a little bit and a little bit more in the second round and other parts of the draft. Do you have a strategy there that you would prefer maybe for the Bengals?
I would prefer Penei Sewell.
Yeah.
I don't think he makes it there. I think NFL teams will agree that he's too rare for his position. So if I'm drafting, and I don't think quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, and so one guy will be a skill position there, not a non-quarterback. And if you're drafting any non-quarterback in this draft class, I don't see how you're passing on Penei Sewell with how many teams need tackles, whatnot. So I think Penei Sewell will be off the board. The interesting thing, though, that Mike Quinn, actually producer of the PFF 2-for-1 Drafts podcast, said and brought up is the Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, to keep Joe Burrow happy sort of thing. We see guys like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, seemingly unhappy with their situations. Do you go Jamar Chase just because he has that connection? Because, Cincinnati's not, they know about quarterbacks wanting to get the hell out of Cincinnati. That's not an uncommon thing here. They got to do whatever they can to make him happy. I think that's a real thing, and I also think that Jamar Chase is good enough that I'd be willing to just sit at 5 and be like, okay, I'll take Jamar Chase.
I mean, also that if you're going to, when you're projecting a receiver to the NFL, it can't hurt to pair him back up with his college quarterback, right? Like at the very minimum, you're probably going to be getting the maximum out of him that you could possibly get by pairing him with that guy.
And a lot of their production was chemistry-based. He wasn't always open the times he was getting big plays on the field.
Generally, sort of conceptually speaking, right, there's been a theory recently that, look, every year is a great wide receiver draft year at this point. Whether it's the effect
not next year. Next year's going to suck. Actually.
Whether it's the effect of spread offense, whatever it is, there's a ton of them almost every single year. Have we reached the point now where you should start to game that in the draft and say, in the second round, I'm going to get a good wide receiver anyway. I don't need to take a receiver in the first. Certainly not in the top 10 picks. I can start targeting guys like Penei Sewell and, other positions because I can come back in the second round and get Michael Thomas.
Scarcity question.
Right? Yeah, whoever it is.
Okay. That's a thing. It certainly is at the receiver position. I felt good enough last year about Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb that I was like, those guys, just the floor is so high that just get it. Like a lot of first-round picks bust anyway. I don't think those guys are going to bust. They're too good. I feel that way about Chase Waddle Smith in this class. They're too good that if you're 11 Giants, need a wide receiver, just take one. You can wait to the second, but then the odds there are, like everyone talks about, Chase Claypool was great. KJ Hamler wasn't quite as great in the second round. Not every the hit rate at that time is just not nearly as high.
There's also dealing with Drew Lock.
Fair. But I think the safetiness of those top three. After that, though, if I'm at those guys are off the board, I'm at 15 on the Patriots. I'm waiting. I'm 16 on the Cardinals. I'm waiting. I'm not going to reach for any of those other guys because
not a hope in hell the Patriots are spending a first-round pick on a wide receiver again ever.
Yeah.
Well, those guys aren't their type. They're good.
They get open.
Yeah, they're good. Let's talk defense a little bit. The last few years, since PFF started, there's seemingly always been a defensive end or a defensive tackle that has just dominated. That is just either two Boses, Myles Garrett, Chase Young, especially at edge this year. There's not that guy. There's not that generational guy that shows up every single year, right, at edge. How does the defensive line class look? And just our top two guys, Kwity Paye from Michigan and Christian Barmore from Alabama, are 11th and 14th on the draft board, where usually we have a guy in the top 5, right?
Yeah. It's the edge class is going to be really interesting. Defense tackle class, it is Barmore, and then there might not be anything else. You can get a run defender in Tyler Shelvin. There's not there. If you told me there's not another guy in this defense tackle class that can actually rush the passer in 3 years from now, wouldn't be surprised. There's just not a ton of talent in this defense tackle class. So if you need one, desperately, Barmore's your option. Edge is much different. Edge, there's maybe the most athletic edge class since we started grading in PFF. These guys, Kwity Paye was the number 1 on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Carlos Basham, 38th player on our board, was number 2. And Jalen Phillips, Gregory Rousseau, Jason Owe has been in the top 10 on Bruce Feldman's freaks list for back-to-back years now. He runs a 4.3 at 255 pounds reportedly.
Wow.
There are legitimate freaks in this class. Azeez Ojulari, too. He's probably the best speed rusher in this class. Ronnie Perkins, probably going to run the 4.5s from Oklahoma. It is a freaky edge class. None of the guys were that productive, though. No one, like we mentioned, Young, Bosa, Garrett, pass rushing grades in the 90s for multiple years. No one was in the 90s in this. I don't believe no one had a pass rushing grade over 90 of any of those top guys. So that's you're banking on development is going to be massive with this edge class. But there is a lot of athletes that have that skill set. So I think if I need one, I'm taking one of them in the first round. So it might not happen right away, but I think in a few years down the road.
NFL teams love that, though.
Yeah.
Edge more than any other position. Yeah. They're just give me the freaky athlete. I know how to coach them to be a great player.
Oh, yeah. They were trying to talk themselves out of the Boses. They've maxed out.
Maxed out at all pro level.
They've maxed out as top 5 edge rushers.
There's no more room for me to do anything with this guy. He's already an all pro. I can't do anything with that.
This will be fascinating because, longtime listeners of the podcast or 2 for 1 will know when we talk about our grades, we feel much better about projecting defensive line grades, right? They are some of our most consistent grades from college to the NFL. So this being a class of freak athletes who don't have the best production, and guys like Rousseau, who we expected to take a step forward, but then opted out, right? Okay. And he's only when I've been writing notes on these guys, there's a lot of notes that said only has 700 career snaps, only has 800 career snaps, right? You usually have 1,500 snaps of these defensive linemen, right? 2 full seasons at least. So this feels like one of those where there's going to be some home runs, there'll be some swings and misses, and it'll depend on that athleticism and how these guys develop, yeah?
Yeah, it's – and that's why I think you'll see rankings all over the map. And trying to project where these guys go in this edge class is going to be a nightmare because it's going to be about body type, and what you want in your defense pretty much in terms of making the decision between – we have Kwity Paye at 11, Owe 19 on the draft board, and then 5 more guys in the top 40. It's and they're all, like I said, all freak athletes. And that I think you could see the lowest guy on our list be Carlos Basham at 38, be the highest guy on some people's boards just because of what they want. He's a different skill set.
Number 6 on your big board, you have a linebacker. And I think you said something along the lines of he's the best linebacker prospect we've seen come out since we've been doing PFF college grading.
And so Micah Parsons, Penn State. The interesting thing about Parsons, if we called him an edge rusher, he's 6'3", 6'4", 245 pounds. He might be edge one in this draft class too. It's like the biggest selling point with Parsons. He is a monster. Runs in the 4.4s at 245. Second highest run defense grade we've ever given behind Reuben Foster as a true sophomore back in 2019 before opting out. Long, athletic, like plus athlete. Not a ton of experience in coverage. Like they spot drop zone in Penn State's defense. Not great when projecting in the NFL. Like you don't spot. Not a lot of teams spot drop zone in the NFL. So it's gonna be very different. But if he goes to a scheme where he's just run defense, rush the passer, blitzer guy, he's awesome. So like him taking on blocks is as good as we've seen college linebacker.
Minus the plus athlete part, I'm hearing you describe a Dante Hightower, because people used to make this mistake all the time. Teams run a 3-4 and they have 2 outside linebackers rush, which is again that's an edge rusher. That's completely different from a linebacker. You don't have linebackers who rush off the edge. They're rare. Yeah. Dante Hightower is one of the few guys that can do that. I mean, there's Ahmad Brooks did it back in the day. Is that the type of player we're looking at?
I think so. And he's like he said he will play like edge. Like he considers himself also an edge rusher. Micah Parsons. He's just very good.
What do you think? So linebacker, so obviously this year in the NFL, record points, yards, everything was off the charts in terms of offense. I don't know how much of that was nixing, holding, and how much it was just insane explosion. But linebacker seemed to be the position that was lit on fire the most, right? Yeah. Those guys just got relentlessly attacked. And consequently, there were like 3 good linebackers in the NFL, right? Because they're the only 3 that could hold up in those kind of scenarios. Does that ding the value of a guy like Micah Parsons? Because right now, linebackers just can't hold up? Or we don't even know if that's going to be like the way it goes, right, in the future, or if they revert to type next year.
Well, I think they're also under attack the way offenses are being constructed with more play action.
Yeah.
It's just a difficult position. And so I do think the difference makers, it's almost like the opposite tight end, where it's like the 3 difference makers at tight end are so valuable. The few difference makers at linebacker, I think, are so valuable. Like we saw what Devin White did in the Super Bowl. Like the guys that are actually athletic and can make plays all over the field. Now Devin White's had his struggles prior, but like the guys that have that caliber and can do those number of things, I think are still like worthy of a top 10 pick. Now, obviously there's still like is Micah Parsons, will he translate? We've not seen too much on him 2 years as a player. Haven't seen him since 2019. But he has the sort of skill set to honestly really do whatever you want at linebacker.
Does it change the type of linebacker you're even looking for in college? Like our teams can be focusing more on those guys that play that overhang position that doesn't really exist in the NFL, where Fred Warner played in college, rather than going for like a traditional linebacker, because at this point, those are the guys with the biggest difference in role.
Describe overhang really quick for
slot listeners.
Yeah, it's like this sort of slot/linebacker hybrid that only exists in college with the super wide hash marks, where you're going to be playing like the field side with a giant area of real estate to cover. It doesn't really exist in the NFL because there's never that much space to cover. So there's a ton of these guys in college that play that role. And a lot of the times you can grade really well because you're never going to see blockers, right? You're out in space the whole time. So if you're a good athlete in space, you're going to end up looking pretty good. And in the NFL, it's more of a hybrid, or it's more of a conventional linebacker role, but you have that experience of operating in space, which is coverage in broad terms.
Yes. And I agree that those are the guys that play really well in that role. Or I think the guys you want to covet more, because the taking on of blocks is not the valuable part of playing linebacker anymore. It is the being able to cover a slot receiver if that's what comes into your territory or like your matchup zone, whatever. Jabril Peppers played that role for Michigan, and he ended up at safety. Warner played that at BYU, ends up at linebacker. Jeremiah Usu-Karamoa played that role at Notre Dame. He's probably going to end up at linebacker, and I agree. Those guys, like, that's a skill set. Being able to play in space is the skill set you want at linebacker nowadays. depending, again, on your scheme, if you're really going to blitz the heck out of your off-ball linebackers, a little different. But, yeah, I think Owusu-Koramoah, that's why you see the NFL being like, oh, he's 215 pounds. We don't care. He has what we want.
Yeah, so he's 18th on our board. JOK for short, Notre Dame. You're a golden homer sometimes when you're ranking these guys, but I think 18th was fair for him.
People are higher on him than I am.
Yeah, I mean, there's talk about him in the top 10.
Yeah.
I know a guy like Jeremy Chin for the Panthers didn't grade great for us, but I think that was because of what Sam was saying, what you guys were saying. Like, he's in a challenging role. Like, he literally played slot / safety / linebacker, and he'll probably develop in that role. And JOK seems like that same type of player that could do that type of thing, right? He flies around the field, man.
So explosive.
He reminded me, just for, since we're changing the way we comp here, Troy Polamalu, as far as just balls to the wall, flying around the field, making stuff happen. That's what
So
he
you're going to
reminds me
find a fictional guy to compare him to.
So he was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list also, and he had one of the craziest numbers. He did 42 pull-ups at 215 pounds.
Wow.
Whoa.
Which is like, I don't know how it's even possible. Like, that's obviously, I don't know how it even translates to a football field, but 42 pull-ups means you're a different level.
You're a freak, whatever your weight is.
I think the next PFF podcast should be hosted by Neil, and he just interviews all the freaks, talks about their workouts. PFF workout.
We'll just ask them how many reps they can do with obscure.
I think that's Neil's destiny. Yeah. Like, that's what he was born.
That would keep him busy too.
Yeah.
That would keep him busy.
Yeah.
Can we set that up, please? Can we get the Neil Hornsby podcast going here? We'll get all the Feldman's Freaks list.
It's really a plan without any drawbacks.
And he'll get guys that like dropped, like Panay. So how'd you drop 30 pounds?
Did you ever see the video of Fletcher Cox doing pull-ups?
No.
Like at 310 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Fletcher Cox is repping pull-ups without problems. I don't know how many he got to, but I'm pretty sure it was like over double digits, pulling 310 pounds.
Good Lord.
That's and plus that dude's long as hell. Like, it's not like he's dealing with stumpy little arms where he's not traveling far.
Yeah.
That was pretty crazy.
Taller hurts you on pull-ups for sure.
My old workout partner, Goster Charles.
Yeah.
6'8", 325. I saw him do 8.
By the way, one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life was Steve doing pull-ups. At one point, there was me, Austin, Gale, and Steve, and we were, one after the other doing reps of pull-ups. And so you got the pull-up bar up here. Austin would go up to it, jump up, catch himself, so he's like a foot off the ground now, and then do his pull-ups, right? I would go up to the thing, basically on tiptoes, I can grab hold, and then I start. Steve goes, grabs the bar, drops like a foot, sinks towards the ground, having taken
knees touching the ground.
Yeah.
I couldn't do a pull-up until senior year of high school. I did not lift weights. I was weak.
Pull-ups aren't easy. They're not
well,
easy.
not when you're your size and length. No. They're not.
I got up to 7 or 8 at one point in my life. So anyway, let's go to the secondary. Cornerback Caleb Farley, we have number 1. Patrick Surtain, number 2. 13th and 16th, respectively, on the draft board. This feels like one that's pretty. I don't always keep up with the other draft boards around. What is the perception around the league? I feel like Surtain is kind of the consensus top guy, right? And we have Farley ahead of him.
I think Farley's ahead of him on a lot of boards I've seen. He's like he has the tools. He runs likely in the 4.3s, 6'2". 207, long. It's just like that Virginia Tech didn't really do him any favors in terms of like projecting to the NFL and what he was asked to do. I think he only played, I should know the number off the top of my head, but it's like 33 snaps in press man coverage his entire college career. That's just like Patrick Surtain has, I think, over 400 snaps in press man coverage his college career. Like, you saw him do what you're going to want him to do in the NFL, but he's not athletic. Like, he might run a 4.6. He is not that caliber.
4.6?
He's just slow. And you got.
Has somebody done the comp between, or not the comp, the like evaluation side by side between Patrick Surtain 1 and Patrick Surtain 2?
I've not seen that. I was too young for Patrick Surtain to really
a playmaker.
Get a handle on his game.
Baller.
Yeah.
A lot of children, a lot of NFL children in this.
I know this one. So
in this draft, right?
Surtain's cornerback 2, obviously, you know who his father is. J.C. Horn's father is
Joe Horn. And
then Asante Samuel Jr.'s father, who's number 4 corner on our board, obviously Asante Samuel Sr.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Surtain, he never feels like he's out of phase down the field, though, which I think is interesting. I mean, that's like...
He's very good at maintaining like contact. And
which is it's a huge part of offsetting speed, right?
Yeah.
Like, Sherman.
Like
No,
Sherman.
who was it? It was Xavier Howard on Chris Collinsworth podcast was saying, look, like it doesn't matter if you run a 4.3. I'm not going to let you run 4.3 past me like
Right.
that. As long as, and that's what Sherman has always been so good at throughout his career. Like Sherman with his 4.5s, high 4.5s or whatever he ran. Like it doesn't matter. There was never any period where a guy who ran a 4.3 ever got a clean run around Sherman. So it doesn't matter how much faster you run than him, and that's like it's the thing that you use to offset the speed differential.
Those two at the top, I think, are going to be really interesting to see how they're valued, because you said Farley's got all the tools: 6'2", fast, make-up speed for days that shows up on film. Surtain is so patient, he just knows how to play the ball in the air for the most part. Like he does a lot of things really, really well there. If those are the top two corners, is the rest of the class all over the place? We usually throw a ton of corners in the first round because of their value. We only have one other guy, and it's J.C. Horn at 23, and we're talking Asante Samuel, Tay Gowan, Tyson Campbell. What's going on with the rest of the class? Where
Samuel's
are the strengths and weaknesses?
Small. Like he's very small. I think he's still playing on the outside, maybe not in every scheme, but like he got even thrown around by college wide receivers. As soon as you see that, it's a red flag. That's going to happen more at the NFL. Horn is just really up and down player. Like a lot of penalties on his tape. Overly physical, like that college corner that's just taking advantage of the rules to a fault. That as soon as he gets to the NFL, when you're not able to do that, is he still going to stick with wide receivers? This is the big thing. So they have their lumps in those two regards, but I don't love the cornerback class after that. Then it goes all the way 50 to Tay Gowan is our cornerback 5. I just think these guys are kind of all like day 2 skill sets. I just didn't see sort of performance on tape for a lot of these guys.
Gowan 6'2", Tyson Campbell 6'2", Aaron Robinson from UCF listed at 6'1" with a little. He's got the T-Rex arms going.
Yeah.
There's our first T-Rex arm
30-inch
discussion. Greg Newsome's listed at 6'1". Melifonwu from Syracuse 6'3". It seems like there's some big corners.
Huge.
Sam's biggest pet peeve every year is 6-foot corners artificially being moved up because they're not good, but they're big.
It was only when I have to go through this sequence of useless 6-foot plus corners and tape and evaluate them all as being terrible. That's what was annoying.
Is that where we are, though? Is this all, those
no,
guys
that's
are
the
all
thing.
in
It's
the
like
first
they're
two
not
rounds?
useless. It's kind of like the edge class where it's like those guys have the tools. Did they play great football yet? Not quite really. Like that's the biggest thing. That's why Gowan's 5th on our cornerback board, because I think he runs like in the 4.3s. The guy can fly at 6'2", and he played really good football. 1 year though at UCF, but he played some damn good football.
I'm kind of coming around to the idea though, like the number of these giant freakish wide receivers in the NFL. Like if you are 5'10" and 180, when you have to go up against DK Metcalf, right? And you're like, you now are 6 inches and 50 pounds bigger than me. And even if I run as fast as you, like if we're comparable 4.3s, like just the sheer physics disadvantage you have over that guy at any point in the play is insane. So I kind of get why you're chasing the 6-foot corner that's 200 pounds and can run. Like it's your only hope against a guy like that.
L'Jarius Sneed was that guy, 6'1", 195, long arms, 4.3.
Fast. Yeah.
And like in today's NFL, I think more so than ever before, like Chris Ballard's been on record saying we want guys that can recover. And like guys are going to make mistakes. You're going to get put in shitty situations at cornerback where, you get a switch release and you're all of a sudden chasing from behind. We need guys that are gonna be able to make up that ground now more than ever. And so the speed, the length, I think it is very valuable at cornerback.
Quick philosophical question on that, because Sam, you and I have talked about this, right? Is it unfair sometimes if you look at NFL positions, right? You have reactive and proactive types of positions, right?
Yeah.
So receiver is a proactive position, right? You're dictating the action. Corner, you're reacting, right? Are we harsh in evaluating reactive positions, tackles, offensive linemen in general? They have to pass protect. Corners, they have to respond to receivers. Are we harsh on them because you try to say, well, they get beat this way, they get beat that way? And are we too kind to receivers because you're like, hey, I know this guy is limited, but I can put his skill set as wide receiver 3 and get value out of him? Ooh. How do you balance what a guy can do and can't do when it comes to that different position types?
I think
on the spot.
there's also something, though, in terms of how good you feel about a guy when he dictates terms and does it well.
Yeah.
Because he's dictating terms against 12 different skill sets over the course of a season in terms of like the tackles he's facing or the cornerbacks he's facing. And if he beats all of them at a high level, like you feel good. Like he's done it against a lot of guys. Whereas cornerback, sometimes you just won't see them like, what's the best way to phrase it? Like if you're always reacting, sometimes you're not put in a situation where it's difficult to react. I guess it's not a difficult reaction that you have to make.
But it's easier to cater to a guy's limited to the limitations of a player on offense than it is on defense, right? Like if you have a wide receiver that can't do 4 different things, you don't have to put him in a situation where he doesn't do those 4 different things. He can still have a really useful role within your offense, and it doesn't hurt anything. If you have a cornerback that can't do 4 different things, and suddenly you face a team where those 4 things are all they do, now you're screwed. Now that guy can't play.
And that's what I mean. It's not even a philosophical thing. It's just like the nature of football, right?
Yeah.
So we can look at a third-round wide receiver and say, I know how I'm going to use this guy. That's valuable. If you have a third-round corner, he's in the 3rd round because he probably has enough warts that you're like, man, I need to hide him and only let him do 1 or 2 things that he does well. It's just...
Yeah, it's like the defensive lineman, he doesn't do well in stunts. Well, then we don't stunt that draft. Offense tackle, he doesn't do well in stunts. Shit out of luck.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
A stunt, dude.
Yeah.
You don't dictate. It's just an interesting discussion to me. And we always say creep back to an average on the offensive line. That's why it's like you just get guys who aren't terrible at everything, right? And maybe corner is a little bit like you just don't want Kevin King with the Packers, Mike. Like he got attacked left and right. Sorry, but I mean he got attacked.
Yeah.
Right? And if you have a weakness in the secondary or a weakness on the offensive line, like the Chiefs did or like the Packers did down the stretch here, you can get attacked. Let's wrap it up with some safety talk. 2 TCU guys at the top. You love these guys. And I'll tell you the guy I love who's only 48th on your board. We're going to get him into the top 32 by the end of the show.
Oh, okay. Trayvon Moehrig. I think he's pretty much universally agreed upon as top safety. There's not a ton of top-end talent safety class. I think Moehrig is that guy. Explosive, fast, tall, long, led the NCAA pass breakups each of the last 2 seasons. Got the production. He's just like solid. He's a little stiff. He's not going to be your go man the slot, go versatile, whatever, do anything, Tyrann Mathieu type. He's kind of like quarters or deep type of guy, but he's good in that role. Feel good about him. So I think he ends up going in the 1st round. Darius Washington's his teammate that not going to be everyone's cup of tea because he is 179 pounds. He's 5'8". He is tiny. But man, his tape, he's like as good as it gets at the cornerback position on tape. He doesn't make mistakes in coverage. He doesn't have coverage busts. He doesn't, bite on double moves. He only allowed, I think, something like 170 yards in his entire college career. That guy is just solid as can be. And I think at some point, yes, he will be the lightest at 179 pounds. He'd be the lightest safety ever weighed in at the combine.
Wow.
Ever.
Now, we have a 42 on the draft board.
And yeah, it's small, but Tyrann Mathieu plays at like 185. Like that, it's not unprecedented. And I think in this day and age, even more so, not necessarily what we talk about everyone. You want the space player, not the taking on of blocks guy, not as big. And he's athletic. Like he's not undersized and lacking speed or whatever. Like he has that part of the game too. So I think he's going to overcome his size.
Our Darius Washington, another guy that has about 1,000 snaps to his name in college, but his college coverage grade when compared to recent guys that have gone to the NFL, like he's above the 90th percentile in pretty much everything you would rank going to the NFL. My guy is Elijah Molden from Washington, 48th on the board right now. He's 5'10", 190. He does remind me a little bit of a Tyrann Mathieu type because he's played the slot. He played a little safety. He's probably not as clean there, but I think he's the best slot. You said he's the best slot.
He's the best slot cornerback in this draft, I'd say.
So I think he lands somewhere between like a Mike Hilton, really good solid slot, and a Tyrann Mathieu, which if that is the case, if I'm right there, he's one of the top 32 most valuable players in this draft. So
true.
I think we might be underrating him from a value perspective in terms of.
Boom.
I mean, you just described Micah Hyde, right? That's basically the player you've just summed up.
And Micah Hyde would be a top 32 player
Right.
in this
If you
draft.
knew you were getting Micah Hyde in the draft, in any given draft, he would probably be in the first round.
So move him up, Mike. Fix the draft board.
I'll move Molden up. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I just don't want to have him above Washington. Washington's a better player.
You love Washington. You have a soft
he's
spot
so good.
for him.
Just go watch. Turn on the tape, Steve. All right.
Any other high-level thoughts with the draft? General strengths and weaknesses, or trends, or strategy? Or
I just think the quarterback's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Like it is. Lawrence, Fields, Wilson, and Lance have. Like we haven't seen a quarterback class with this kind of tools in I don't know, like whatever, since '99 when they went 1, 2, 3. I don't even know that. I wasn't doing draft stuff back then.
Who's Achilles Smith in this draft?
Don't draft him. I don't know who it is.
Who's like Cade McNown?
I'll tell you in
this
2 years who it is. But I just think where they come off the board, and like we haven't seen the moving up of guys since that 2018 year. Everyone moving up and wanting to get their guy. I think we do see it this year. I think teams are going to go attack.
Well, so the top end of those quarterbacks is great. Who is your favorite like mid-round flyer?
I like Davis Mills from Stanford.
Okay.
It's a 5-star. I don't love any of the mid-round guys. Like I don't think there's a guy.
Yeah, I mean they're mid-round for a reason.
Yeah, Tresh likes Jamie Newman. I don't quite see it with him. But Davis Mills, only 10 starts, gets the ball out of his hands, doesn't take sacks, fairly accurate with football, not a cannon for an arm, but he looks the part. He's like 6'5", 230. I think he can.
Right.
He can.
Yeah,
he can play in the NFL.
right.
And if you're in the mid-round quarterback, that's
basically as good as you're going to get.
Yeah.
There was a point in Kellen Mond's career I thought he was going to get that first-round hype just because of the size and the tools, little athleticism, never really developed. But again, this recent development of toolsy quarterbacks, does Kellen Mond get late hype here? Number 128 on our board right now, by the way.
I think he might. I think he ends up going in the third.
Making some plays in the Senior Bowl, the game itself.
He looked better in the Senior Bowl than I've very much anticipated. So but like, man, he was the same guy as a sophomore, as he was as junior, as he was as a senior. Like, there was just nothing different to his game. And so,
to be fair, that's how Justin Herbert was.
But Justin Herbert
also
was
how
still
Josh Rosen was
better.
Josh Rosen was exactly the same as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Get anything else, Sam?
Well, that's like the draft in a nutshell, right? It's that you can essentially paint the exact argument for two completely diametrically opposed situations and why the whole thing remains a crapshoot.
I'm in the middle. I'm working with the R&D team. We're doing a little research on that. And hopefully
we'll fix it?
Well, we're going to see what the results come. We're looking at one-year wonders, and we're going to look at guys that peaked their second to last year, right? And those guys, every year we evaluate, we're like, man, what do I do with – like Jameis Winston was way better as a redshirt freshman than he was as a redshirt sophomore. And they're like, what do you do with that type of analysis? Is there any signal there, or is it just, I don't know, noisy, and trying to look into some of that
Those
stuff.
are the guys I hate, the guys that peak their second last season and then go backwards. And you're like, I have no idea what to do with them.
I agree.
That was good, Mike. Tell everybody about 2-for-1 drafts and what you guys are up to.
Oh, yeah, follow 2-for-1 drafts, 3 podcasts a week. Me and Austin Gale. You
guys are flying up the rankings. I pulled up the iTunes list the other day. You guys are like top something, like high.
Hey,
within the top 100, I think.
Top 100 podcast there. That's all you need to know. It's a top 100 podcast.
In sports.
About football and rookies, mainly football and rookies.
I mean, it's draft time now. It's
draft time now. We'll hit on free agency a little bit, but more like team needs, that sort of thing. And then get a draft guide. It's the best draft guide that's, I think, ever existed.
It is really good. I mean, I you know more than anybody, Mike. I don't want to compliment you if at all possible, but it's great stuff.
I used to get draft guides for my birthday every year growing up. I was born April 27th, so that was right around draft time. And if I would have gotten this for my birthday growing up, I would have been way more informed and knew who the Packers were going to pick instead of we used to guess who the Packers were going to pick, like write down 5 guys. I think I got, in like 15 years, I got 2 guys. So outside the first round. So this one, you can get more than that.
That's great, man. You would have skipped PFF and gone right to the NFL too with all this information. So check out the draft guide, and I'm proud of seeing how much it's grown after we used to, throw it together with old PFF green and
it's still a PDF,
spider charts, but it's getting better and better, and we're trying to throw all that information on the website too for our Edge and Elite subscribers. So grab Edge and Elite. The draft guide comes with it. Go check that out. Check out 2-for-1, and maybe we'll have you back on as draft season heats up, Mike.
If you guys will have me, I'll be here.
Appreciate it. All right, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday. Full off-season mode now. We'll be telling your team, telling you how your team's going to get better.
Yeah, no games.
No football games to review. And go check out the PFF NFL Daily. That's where we hit on the Russell Wilson stuff, those comments, QBs trying to play Madden franchise mode. It's all on the PFF NFL Daily this week, so go check that out. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Good wave. Good wave, Sam. You're so friendly to everybody.